Prošloga tjedna započeli smo razgovor s engleskim autorom i istraživačem Davidom Ickeom u kojem su dotaknute mnoge teme, od gnostičkih učenja do transhumanizma. Danas ćemo nastaviti s preispitivanjem temeljnih postavki o našem svijetu, a to će se zbivati ovdje, na rubu znanosti. U prvom nastavku ove emisije dotaknuli smo se zapravo drevnih gnostičkih zapisa iz znak Hamadija koji opisuju nešto što bismo danas opisali kao umjetnu stvarnost. Oni spominju demiurga, arkone i slično. I također napravili smo neku osnovu i neki link prema transhumanizmu i na koji način se zapravo svijet danas vodi prema tome. Mogli bi sada malo se proširiti osim u prošlost, možda malo otići u svemir, jer kada se počnu jednom barijere konsenzusa normalnog rušiti, odjednom puno informacija dolazi, svijet postaje sve čudniji. Pa bilo bi zanimljivo vidjeti kakve su osobine ti gnostici pripisivali tom demiurgu, tim arkonima, što su oni zapravo bili, kako su funkcionirali, kako su razmišljali, koje su bile njihova ograničenja, odsustvo mašte i slično. Da možda bismo mogli nešto saznati o prirodi zapravo onog što možemo interpretirati kao virtualnu stvarnost.
Well, I came to certain conclusions because I've been researching this now full time since 1990. I came to certain conclusions. And then I came across the texts from the Gnostic belief system that were found buried in a jar in 1945 at a place called Nag Hammadi, about 80 miles north of Luxor on the Nile in Egypt. And I read these texts and they are estimated to have been buried maybe around 400 AD, which fits with the kind of time period when there was a massive attack on the royal library in Alexandria, which was basically run by Gnostic thinkers by the Roman Church. And the person running the royal library, Hypatia, was murdered. And it's believed that the writings in terms of their information goes back further. And I was astonished to read them because, first of all, unlike religious texts and biblical texts that have been in the public arena for a long, long period, these have been buried since about 400 AD. They've not been in a position to be changed, which means you get the original of what was written and not a changed version of it. And about a fifth of these writings referred to a force of manipulation they called the archons, and a Lord Archon, as they called it in their language of the time, or demiurge, which was the prime force which made copies of itself, which they called archons or rulers. And they described these archons very much as the Islamic world describes the jinn. And they say that this demiurgic force, this archontic force, let me call it, was what created this reality that we're experiencing. That it was and is a fake reality, as they called it. And that this archontic force was, to use our language, a form of robotic artificial intelligence. They said that this archontic force was not, quote, natural, but inorganic. And because of that, it had the ability to copy what they called counter-mimicry, but not to create from scratch. So if you gave this force a blank sheet of paper, it wouldn't be able to create anything, but give it something that exists and it can twist it to its own ends. And for me, this I equate this archontic force as akin to a computer virus. If you look at a computer virus, it doesn't create, it distorts what it infests and takes it over. The computer virus feeds off the power of what it's taken over, i.e. the computer system. According to endless accounts all over the world, ancient and modern, this archontic force feeds off human energy. And in the Matrix movies, where the Morpheus character held up the battery and said the machines have turned humans into one of these, that is a profound truth when you put this together, because this archontic force relates to what we call fear. You see ancient accounts of the time when fear came into the world. This force is fear, and sub-frequencies of fear, like anxiety and depression and violence and conflict. And like every frequency, it can only absorb its frequency. Radio station A cannot absorb radio station B because they never the twain shall meet. They're on a different frequency. So for this archontic computer virus, let's use that analogy, to feed off human energy, it needs to create that energy within its frequency band. And it has structured society to generate maximum fear, maximum conflict, maximum all these low vibrational emotional states. So there's this inversion constantly of what's good for humanity and what's good for this force. Classic is a war. A war is bad for humanity, but it's perfect for this force because it generates vast amounts of the very energy on which it feeds. So it doesn't want love in the world. It doesn't want balance. It doesn't want harmony. It wants imbalance because it itself is imbalanced. And when we talk about reptilians and greys and extraterrestrials and what have you, isn't it rather extraordinary that I talk about a reptilian force manipulating human society in cohort with a subordinate force that we call the greys, with the big black eyes, the classic E.T. And in these Gnostic writings, buried around 400 AD, they say that in their prime form, the archons are just energy. They're not form, they're energy. What I would call a state of inverted awareness. A computer virus absolutely fits the bill, I would say, from my own research. But that this archontic force can take form. It can manifest, although only briefly, in and of itself. And don't forget, the Islamic jinn is where we get the name genie from. And the jinn are the archons, quite clearly, because the correlation between the descriptions of the two. And that the two prime forms that this archontic force works through, because they can also, if you like, become incarnate through these forms. One, they say in these writings from at least 400 AD, takes a reptilian form. And the other form looks like a grey fetus with big black eyes. Now these are the very descriptions today of people who say they've been abducted by these entities. There is a man who's in his 90s now in America called William Tompkins, who's just relatively recently gone public through a book and interviews on his experiences, he says, from the 1940s, when he was seconded into a US naval, what he calls think tank, which operated out of the massive US naval base in San Diego, which worked on interaction between the human elite and extraterrestrial visitors, shall we say. And what does this man say in his book? Long, long after I've been writing it and being laughed at for it, he says, world governments are controlled by a reptilian race, and the moon is its command center, both of which I've been saying for many, many, many years. So then you look at the Zulus and others around the world who are describing this force of manipulation. They describe this force as the Chitahuri, the children of the serpent, or the devastators. You've got Central American shaman who carry the ancient knowledge, describing this force as the flyers or the predators, and describing it in precisely the same way all over the world. So it's not that, you know, you take one find, like the Nag Hammadi find in 1945, and say, oh, this is how it is then. What you do is you look at the totality of all these descriptions, and you see that they're describing the same thing, and different expressions of the same thing. And because they don't have the ability to directly create, this force doesn't have the ability to directly create, only to twist what's already there, they have to manipulate humanity to create its own prison. And that's what they've done. One of the shamans in Central America, who talks about the predators, the predator race, non-human race manipulating human society, he asks a question, explain to me the brilliance of man the engineer against the stupidity of his systems of belief. Well, this can be explained, because what's been happening is humanity has been manipulated to be intellectually advanced in the level of thought, to the point where it can build a technological prison for itself, but at the same time not to be wise enough to see that that's what it's doing. You see, we're back to Tesla about science thinking deeply but not thinking clearly. At the level of thinking deeply, you can understand how technology works to the point where you can build a technological prison, which is what we're doing. But if you're not thinking clearly, you can't see why you're doing it and what the consequences are. And so we have now reached the point where we can build a technological prison for ourselves, controlled by what? Controlled by artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is basically what the Gnostics were describing this archontic force to be. And I watched a series of documentaries, scientific documentaries that were on the Science Channel, I think might have been on the Discovery Channel. They were fronted up by Morgan Freeman, the actor. And they were called Through the Wormhole. And what they did was, they talked to mainstream scientists, yes, but they talked to people in mainstream science who were at their cutting edge, and were trying to answer the questions that need asking. And one of the episodes was asking the question, could digital aliens, as they call them, take over technological systems? Could they be hiding in technological systems? And this is another thing, you see, about human perception. We have been manipulated to believe that because we look like this, then this is what life is. I find it hilarious when I see stories, one of which came out a few weeks ago, of scientists finding Earth-like planets in another solar system which could sustain life. The myopia is so intense that they're only looking for Earth-like planets within this narrow band of visible light, for possible locations for other forms of intelligent life. We exist in a reality that is based on oxygen and other parts of this atmosphere, because the biological computers we are occupying are sustained by that atmosphere. But it doesn't mean that there aren't other forms of life that can be sustained by a different atmosphere. And this is one of the reasons why these entities cannot manifest in this reality for too long, because it's not their atmosphere. This is why they have to work through bloodlines and networks within the human world to impose themselves on the human world. So anyway, what this Morgan Freeman edition concluded, talking to mainstream scientists, was that yes, life can take any form. What is life? It's a state of awareness. It doesn't have to have a body even. It can be digital. It can take any form. There's levels of us that are digital. And that, yes, they can occupy technological systems. So I hear all the time now, we all do, AI this, AI that, AI the other, oh, it's going to be controlled by AI, or this now even armies and lethal weaponry, drones controlled by AI. I never hear this question. What is AI? What is it? And the more that I research this, the more my conclusions say that this force in its base form, which is energetic, a state of awareness, that is what AI is, or in the end is designed to be. Now, we were told, and it's now happening, by during the brief tenure of the CIA of David Petraeus, when he was briefly head of the CIA, for some scandal forced him out, that we were now going to have the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things, which is now, like I say, happening, is where everything is connected to the Internet. So your fridge is connected to the Internet via smart meters, etc. So your car, driverless cars. Why do we need driverless cars? Connected to the Internet. Everything is being connected to the Internet. All your smartphones, everything. Now, what is Ray Kurzweil, the promoter of transhumanism, saying, as we've discussed? He is saying that by 2030, humans will be technologically connected to the cloud. What is he talking about with the cloud? He's talking about a Wi-Fi artificial reality controlled by artificial intelligence, which will be massively the Internet. So now you have technology connected to the Internet. He wants humans connected to the Internet. And therefore, anything connected to the Internet will be controlled by those that control, or that which controls the Internet. And what is that going to be? They're open about it. Artificial intelligence. The world is being taken over, humans are being taken over by this technological network, which is gathering by the day, which is itself controlled by this force. I mean, these scientists are asking the question now, could the Internet wake up? When you look at the number of synapses in the brain against the connections in the Internet is vastly greater than the human brain in terms of the electrical connections. Already, it can't wake up. Of course it can wake up. It almost certainly already has. So this is where we're going, and it's being hidden from us by this process of getting people addicted to technology, so that we love our own servitude, and we demand our own, and the next level of the prison. Oh, have you got the latest? Actually, no, I haven't. Thank you.
Dopunit ću sa nekoliko riječi neke od točaka koje ste doticali, jer ih ima puno. Primjerice, postoji autor koji je napisao 1933. godine knjigu, zove se John Bathurst Dean, koji je napisao knjigu koja se zove Štovanje zmije i rekao je da je pronalazeći i prateći ikonografiju zaključio i zapisao da ni vjerske razlike ni geografske razlike nisu bile zapravo razlog i svim kulturama, čak i onim najprimitivnijim i najciviliziranima također, svi su se klanjali, kako je rekao, s istom predanošću, istom osebunom božanstvu, svetoj zmiji, ili je tako bilo predstavljena. Što se pak tiče ove priče o vezi umjetne inteligencije, rekao bih da znanstveno-fantastični filmovi općenito služe kao jedna neka vrst predikcije, navikavanja na ono što će doći, pa to naravno da odmah priziva Terminatora u pamćenje. No, s obzirom da ovih tema ima jako puno, često puta ljudi znaju se pitati zašto su predavanja Davida Ickea tako duga, 9 sati. Odgovor je jednostavno, zato jer se žuri. Pa da ne bismo baš sve pokrivali, pozabavimo se malo putovanjem u svemir. U vašoj najnovijoj knjizi, a i onim prethodnima, bavili ste se prvo mjesecom pa Saturnom. Pa koji podaci nama govore zapravo da je mjesec doista bi mogao biti umjetni satelit, baza? Što je na njemu tako čudno da zapravo može izazvati opravdane sumnje da nije tamo, kako bi se reklo, bez veze?
Well, the moon shouldn't be there. Mainstream scientists say that. They can't explain where the moon came from. And there's no way that a body 2,106 miles across should be circling a planet this size. When NASA have smashed big impacts into the moon, it has wobbled, in the words of one witness, as if there were gigantic technological, straps inside holding it together, the way it wobbled. And every time they've hit it with big impacts, it has reacted as if it's hollow. Carl Sagan, the great cosmologist, said a natural body cannot be a hollow object. Hydraulic straps, he said, inside it, wobbling. We never see the far side of the moon from Earth. And witnesses who've gone public, there were some that were gathered together at the Washington Press Club some years ago, who had insider experience at NASA, who said that they'd seen pictures of the far side of the moon. And there were amazing and enormous structures on it. But we never see that, of course. And the other people, scientists, have said the strange thing about the moon is that what's on the surface of the moon should be inside. As one said, the moon's made inside out. Then you look at the detailed article written by two Soviet scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, as long ago as 1970, who looked at the long list of anomalies about the moon that make no sense whatsoever and cannot be explained by the fact that it's a natural body. And they concluded that it was some kind of gigantic craft and everything was going on inside. Now, I mean, think of the Death Star, although their description came before the Death Star in Star Trek, but similar concept. And this man, William Tompkins, who claims to have worked for a US naval think tank directly responsible for extraterrestrial interaction, specifically mentions the moon in his information and in his book, where he says it's actually a command center for the extraterrestrial race that takes a reptilian form that is actually behind manipulating human society. And for me, from my research, the moon is firing an information source at us, which is affecting our perception and is affecting our our behavior. There was a long and detailed article in a magazine called Nexus, comes out of Australia and talks about out-of-the-box stuff, by a whistleblower some years ago, 2011, after I've been writing about all this stuff, who said that there was what he called a mini CERN in Africa. And from 1995, for 5 years, they managed to have communication with an entity in another dimension. And the project, they said, was called the Charney Project, which plays out as computer interface. And I was reading this article just because I was interested in the subject. I didn't know where it was going. And first of all, the entity is quoted as saying through this computer interface that humans are controlled by a reptilian race that is expert in technology. What was that line? Their God is their technology. Think transhumanism. And I read on, and then starts talking about the moon, which I've always been writing about by then. At how if the moon wasn't there, then first of all, the Earth would be much calmer, not just in terms of weather and wind and severity of storms, but calmer emotionally. That humans were being manipulated into states of anxiety, for instance, via what was coming from the moon. States of anxiety equal the energetic frequency that this force feeds off. Then you look at, again, the ancient cultures. What do they say about the moon? The Zulus describe the moon as an egg because they say the yolk has been taken out, which kind of relates to what that scientist said about the moon's inside out. What's on the surface should be inside. Because what these Soviet scientists were saying was that in their view, and this would answer many of the anomalies of what's on the surface, that this moon planetoid, as they call it, was hollowed out. And these ancient cultures also talk about the fact that the moon's not always been there, that it was brought there. In terms of the Zulus, they say it was brought there by the Chitahuri, the children of the serpent, and that the Chitahuri still live in the moon. This relates to William Tompkins and his reptilian command center being the moon. And so when you put it all together, there are many correlations of the fact that the moon's not what it appears to be, a natural body. The other thing is that there was a BBC documentary some years ago which was entitled "Do We Really Need the Moon?" And it concluded, rightly it seems, that if the moon was just a little bit further out or just a little bit closer, life on Earth would be very different. And then you look at the chances of the moon being so perfectly placed that when viewed from the Earth at the time of an eclipse, it is the same size as the sun. What's the chances of that? Well, the chances of so many of these anomalies being accidental. And they have no idea where it came from. They had a go once when they said that the moon was probably created when a Mars-type planet hit the Earth while the Earth was forming, and a lot of the Earth went off and became the moon. When the physics of that didn't work out, they went for the double whammy story, that this Mars-type planet hit the moon, went away, then come back and had another go, and became the moon. Except that the moon and the Earth are so different, the story's ludicrous. If you take the moon to be artificial part construct and to be the kind of thing that I'm talking about, the anomalies start to disperse and start to be answered, as these scientists did in 1970. But of course, they used the term that people immediately react against. They said they believed the moon was some kind of gigantic spaceship. And of course, no, we're back to the postage stamp normal. That's so far out of the box that most people will just reject it with a laugh. But the more and more that people know about the moon, the more this is starting to be the way that people are going, because as a natural body, none of it makes sense.
Kad smo već došli toliko daleko da razmišljamo kako je mjesec umjetno tijelo postavljeno da nas kontrolira, nema nikakvog razloga da razmišljamo da priča ovdje i završava. U vašoj zadnjoj knjizi općenito već neko vrijeme dosta vremena posvećujete Saturnu. Kroz mitologiju, kroz simboliku, ali također i kroz fotografije NASA i kroz nekakvu, rekao bih, fizikalnu dinamiku vezanu uz njegove prstenove i slično. Što vas je dovelo do razmišljanja o Saturnu i kakav je bio njegov utjecaj i mjesto u današnjoj situaciji ili u prošlosti, s obzirom da sad već pričamo o jednoj, rekao bih, priči kozmičkih razmjera?
Well, let's look at what planets are and what can be done to manipulate our reality. We live in a simulation. So when you look at the heavens, see it for a moment as an electrical communication system. There is now a whole area of research in science outside of the mainstream, but mainstream is now having to be pulled in more and more because of what they're finding, which is called the electric universe. And this details, quite rightly, that this reality, certainly on one level, is about electromagnetism and electricity. This is the level that Tesla was talking about. When he said that you can have free energy technology to give people all the warmth and power you need without fossil fuels, this is what he was talking about. This is why he said, if you want to understand the universe, you've got to understand frequency and vibration. He's talking about this level. How do computers communicate? Electrically. How does the brain communicate? Electrically. How does the genetic structure in general communicate? Electrically. So we are interacting with what I call the cosmic internet, or this quantum computer Wi-Fi field that I call the simulation, electrically and electromagnetically on one level. Now, anything that can interfere with that electrical communication can interfere with our perceptions. It can be hacked into, it can be changed. And I say the moon is doing that, and also that Saturn, and for another day, the constellation of Orion is involved in this. And what it's interesting is when you pick up these different aspects of this manipulation of the communication system via heavenly bodies, they just turn out to be the heavenly bodies that the ancients used to worship and focus upon and perceive their gods came from. So anyway, if you read a fantastic book by a man called David Tolbert, who was actually involved in the electric universe research. He wrote a book years ago called The Saturn Myth. And what he did, it must have taken him a long time of research. He went around the ancient cultures all over the world and just documented what they said about Saturn. And the correlation was remarkable, and the symbols that they used, which are still being used today all around us, though most people don't realize they're actually symbols of Saturn. And they told a common story that not millions of years ago, far, far, far more recently than that, Saturn was actually the main sun when viewed from Earth. And that the Earth had a two-sun system, a twin-sun system. Saturn, which is a sun, not a planet, and the sun we see today. And that when you looked from the Earth to Saturn, you looked through Mars and Venus. They went round as in one line. And this answers the question of why ancient cultures were so obsessed with Saturn. Why was Saturn the prime god of Rome? If Saturn was then, or when the myths started, where it is now, why would anyone focus on it from Earth? But if you realize that actually it was the dominant body in the Earth's sky, then you can see why Saturn is called the god of 1,000 names, because of all the names around the world given to Saturn. Of course it would be the focus, because it was the thing you could see. The ancients described this, and then they describe how fantastic upheavals happened in the solar system that changed the nature of the, shall we say, planetary layout. And this is all to be found in the geological and biological record of the Earth. These are the myths of the end of Atlantis and the end of Lemuria or Mu and such like. And people like Immanuel Velikovsky, as far back as the 1950s, was writing a series of books about the evidence for catastrophic changes in the solar system involving Saturn and others that almost destroyed the Earth. I mean, there's endless books about this. There's one I read, I remember, called When the Earth Nearly Died. And again, when you look around the ancient cultures and the myths and legends and accounts, they all describe this. I mean, you know, one blatant aspect of it is the biblical Great Flood, when what happened. And after this upheaval, Saturn was where it is now, and we had the layout that we have now in the heavens. Now, there is no descriptions whatsoever in any of the ancient accounts of Saturn as an Earth's sun that describe rings. None. It was the sun. They don't describe rings at all. And then that brings us to the work of Norman Bergrun, now in his 90s, who has a long history in technology, space technology, and other high technology, going back decades and decades and decades. And he was a guy who saw the world as scientists see the world, saw Saturn as people see Saturn. And then he started looking at photographs, first of all coming from the Voyager craft to Saturn in the 1980s, the early 1980s. And he looked at the pictures. And he realized that the rings were changing in a few minutes when they were supposed to be, according to the official story, there and static, and that's how they always have been. Even more so in early, what would it be, 2004, when the Cassini craft went to Saturn, and it's still there, apparently they're going to ditch it this year, started bringing photographs back. And he realized something very strange was going on. Not least because not only was he seeing the rings change when they shouldn't, and there are mainstream stories now about the rings changing, what's going on, we don't understand it, but he also saw enormous craft. And don't take his word for it, the pictures exist. The pictures exist, they're in my books, they're in his books. He wrote a book called Ringmakers of Saturn, detailing all the evidence that he had with the pictures. And these are pictures of, not the odd one, lots of them, of enormous, he doesn't call them spacecraft, he calls them electromagnetic vehicles, several times the size of the Earth. And if you put the Earth next to Saturn, you'll realize that our version of size and Saturn's version of size are not the same. Not only were they all around Saturn, they were going in the rings, and when they got in the rings, they were spewing out vast amounts of what he called exhaust that were making the rings. What they've also found, and they're still being made, they're still changing, what they also found as a result of these probes to Saturn is that at the Saturn North Pole they have a vast hexagon storm, big enough to encompass 4 Earths, and it's permanent. At the bottom of Saturn, at the southern pole, they have an eye storm, looks like an eye, which from when they first saw it to now is still there. And there was a story in a British newspaper only a few months ago that over the last 4 years, this hexagon storm has changed from blue to gold over 4 years. They have no idea why. Then you realize that the hexagon storm, a cycle of it, happens in exact correlation with the cycle of radio wave signals coming from Saturn. It has its own frequency, its own signature, its own frequency signature. And then I got sent, and you can hear it, you know, it's been recorded, you can hear the sounds coming off Saturn. And then I got sent this picture of a Saturn ring by a professional sound engineer who said, I see that every day in my work, that's sound. And when I put it all together with lots of other information, for me, what Saturn is a fantastic broadcasting system, which we are decoding, and which the moon is amplifying. And in 1979, they found another enormous ring around Saturn, from 3.7 to 7.4 million miles away from Saturn. And this ring is big enough to encompass 1 billion Earths. And these are only the rings that we see, not the rings of sound that we don't see. Rings of information that we don't see, which we are decoding into this fake reality that the Gnostics talked about, and the fake reality, the simulation that more and more mainstream scientists are talking about. It's basically like hacking in to a computer system and changing the nature of the information that the target population are decoding into a reality. And what's been happening is the reality is getting smaller. So you start out with a simulation. Then you have the if you like, the hack of the simulation, which puts people in a smaller reality within the simulation. And now through transhumanism, they want to put us in a reality which only connects us technologically to a AI cloud and an even smaller simulation. And what I'm saying, and what some scientists are saying, is that this universe is a quantum computer, which they're now building in places around the world, quantum computers. And a quantum computer is a computer that has its information embedded in the energetic fabric of the computer. Two organizations that are driving transhumanism are Google, and now its parent company Alphabet, to hide the extent of Google and its activities, and DARPA. DARPA is the technological development arm of the Pentagon. And DARPA and Google, in terms of its technological development of robotics and transhumanist technology, are working together. And they, along with others in the internet giant field, are dominating the development and funding of what they call the D-wave quantum computer. And I mentioned earlier about this archontic force being described by the Gnostics as being expert in counter mimicry, basically mimicking something that already exists. And the transhumanist connect humans to the cloud quantum computer, because that's what it's designed to be controlled by eventually, is counter-mimicking the wider simulation that we have been experiencing up to this point, but squeezing even more our perceptual range into an even smaller range of perception. In other words, if you could symbolize it as being entrapped in a box, then entrapped in a smaller box, then entrapped in a tiny box. And with every new reduction of the, quote, box, we become more and more detached from the expanded state of awareness that is our natural state.
Prepustit ćemo čitateljima da otkriju druge poveznice Saturna sa mitologijom. On se često prikazuje i kao šesterokraka zvijezda i kao kocka i tako dalje. No previše tu podataka, no jedan podatak vezan uz Saturna, to je ovaj šestostrani oblik, nas vodi u područje koje ste također dotaknuli u knjizi, koje je očigledno vezano uz prirodu stvarnosti i prirodu manipulacije, a to su fraktali. Koja su najnovija otkrića vezano uz fraktale i na koji način nas oni dovode zapravo u vezu sa onime što mi doživljavamo kao stvarnost?
Well, the thing is that it's been seen for a long time that within nature, within our reality, there are constantly recurring mathematical sequences. There is the Fibonacci sequence, where you add the previous numbers to get the next one. 1 and 1, 2, 2 and 1, 3, 3 and 2, 5. That sequence is found throughout nature. You've got the pi sequences, golden mean, etc. And you have fractals, which are basically a form of holographic reality, where the smaller is a smaller version of the bigger, which is what you find with holograms. And we live in a holographic simulation, and therefore you're going to find holographic mathematics. And holographic mathematics are found constantly in the fabric of our reality. These various scientific studies, like at the University of Bonn in Germany and Gates in America, a scientific advisor to Barack Obama during his presidency, have both found mathematical sequences and codes which relate to it being a simulation. I mean, Gates was asked once, have you found in the fabric of our reality codes that are the same as you find in search engines, etc., in computers? And his answer was yes, the same. And so this mathematical, geometrical, recurring series of sequences in our reality has been a mystery up to this point. Why is it there? Why everything from the way a shell spirals to the form of it, the proportions of a human face, why do they break down to the same basic mathematical and recurring geometrical mathematical sequences? I would strongly suggest that it's because they're computer codes. You know, if you look in a computer, and if you look in internet technology, you're going to find the same recurring codes, the same encoded sequences that they work on. So if we do live in a simulation, you would absolutely expect that there would be constantly recurring mathematical and geometrical sequences, exactly what we have. The Gnostics describe how this archontic force, in their terms, took a bad copy of the original universe, and that's the fake reality that we're experiencing. Now, of course, in their language, they can't describe a simulation because they haven't come across that. They haven't got that language. So they talk about a bad copy. Bad copy, a simulation of something that existed before, but a bad copy. You imagine something like you've got a website and you download a copy of the website. This is why people describing the Gnostic documents talk about the fact that they downloaded the fractal patterns of the universe. This archontic force downloaded the fractal patterns of the universe. You take a copy of it. The original still exists, but now you've got a copy, and you've got control of that copy. So now you can change it as you want. You're not changing the original now, you've got the copy and changing the copy. And the copy would have been a bad copy of the original, which is described in extraordinarily beautiful terms. And over this period, this bad copy has been changed and changed and changed and changed and changed to fit the desires, demands, and atmospheric needs of this force and the way that it takes form. So if you look at one of the energetic sources of this this archontic force, it is radiation. I mean, the whole of this reality is based on radiation. That's what the electromagnetic spectrum is. And if you go back only to the 1950s, the increase in technological radiation in our atmosphere and the atmosphere, the fields of energy that we interact with every day, is absolutely shocking and catastrophic. There's a guy in Canada, a scientist who specialized in researching this, and he's described it as basically an experiment with human existence, because this radiation increase is now overlapping the human electrical field, the central nervous system, and that's part of this technological takeover. And so then you know, people say, and they ask the question, and it's an understandable question, why would this network of family bloodlines that represent this archontic force in human reality, what we call the elite in its various names, why would it destroy the planet it lives on? Why would it be devastating the environment? Why would it be building up this, for humans, catastrophic level of atmospheric radiation? Well, how about that that's what they need to exist in, and they're changing the human world to become their world? This is what I suggest is happening. And as humans mutate as a result of this radiation vast increase, some will mutate into a form that will be able to handle that increased radiation, and many others won't. And the ones that do, they'll be the ones left behind. Where the ones that don't fuse into this increased radiation field, they'll be gone. And they're basically telling you that. What they're saying is, unless you fuse with this technological reality, then the humans that don't do it will just die out. They're telling you. So this is where we're at. And you know, think of what we've been talking about in these two chats we've had. And then imagine turning on the television news and being told what you need to know about the world every day. Look at the difference between what's on that news bulletin and what we've been talking about.
I za kraj, ako stane u par minuta, naravno ono što ljude najviše zanima, rješenje. Da bi čovjek detektirao rješenje, mora imati prvo pravu analizu problema za koje treba rješenje. Stoga, kako zapravo nadvladati transhumanističku tehnologiju i sve ono što nas zapravo vodi u tehnološki kavez i kavez svijesti kojeg ste opisivali u ove dvije emisije?
Well, there's two levels. One is the five sense level, and that's recognizing that this technological explosion is leading somewhere, and it's not happening by organic unfolding randomly. It's happening for a reason, and that reason is becoming more and more blatantly obvious. But you see, if this is a projection and the whole basis of human control is control of perception and holding people in a narrow band of frequency, which you might call five-sense reality, then the solution, or removing the cause of the problem, is obvious. It's not stockpiling weapons, and it's not, you know, going to war with the enemy. It's changing our frequency, because everything is frequency. And if you are in a certain state of perception, you are operating in a certain frequency. And the more limited terms you see yourself in, the lower the frequency. I mean, as Einstein said, you get the frequency you want, you get what that frequency represents. As he said, that's not philosophy, that's physics. So if you're operating on a certain frequency, which is what five-sense perception puts you in, then you're in the prison, you're in the mind prison. If you identify with, you know, I'm Ethel down the store, I have no power, that represents itself as a frequency, and a very low frequency. And a very low frequency can only access a very low frequency of what? Information, insight, understanding. Once we reevaluate our sense of self-identity, and we start to see ourselves not as Ethel down the store, but as infinite awareness having an experience in a reality, our self-identity is no longer Ethel. That's just a label. It's just an experience. Our self-identity is infinite awareness having the experience. We've moved our point of attention. And as you move your point of attention and you expand your sense of self into the realms of I am pure consciousness, and potentially I am all consciousness, because as I put it, we are a point of attention with an infinite awareness. But that point of attention can be Ethel or it can be infinite awareness, just a choice of how much of this awareness we self-identify with. And therefore, when you re-evaluate your sense of identity to that, your frequency massively increases. And you start to tap in to levels of awareness, levels of insight, and levels of potential to change that operate well beyond this world, this prison. And then everything changes. And this is why when people go through this, and I've met them all over the world that've been through it, I've been through it, I went through it 30 years ago nearly. They say, it's so obvious now, why couldn't I see it before? Because you were there then, and now you're there. Now you're seeing the forest, you were seeing the twigs before. And everything comes from that. It's like Einstein said again, you cannot solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created them. But that's what we're trying to do all the time. So politics, look at politics. Politics is the same level of consciousness called Party A, creating problems, and then the same level of consciousness comes in called Party B to try to do something about the problems before, and they create more problems. Why? Because they're the same level of consciousness that created them. They might be called different names, but it's the same thing. If we are going to get out of this, we need to move to another level of consciousness, and we're only going to do that by self-identifying with a different perception of the I. From being little me, and I'm all my labels, to being I am beyond all labels. I am awareness and capable of creating anything. There is no limitation at that point, whereas there is constant limitation when we self-identify with phantom self, five-sense self. You know, we're not going to be able to change anything unless we change ourselves and change our level of consciousness. Anyone that tells you otherwise is kidding you and kidding themselves.
Davide, hvala vam puno za vaše vrijeme i do neke sljedeće prilike. Doviđenja.
Thank you very much.